Hey folks, welcome back to Zimbabwe and Africa. This is Chris coming to you once again just a mere 20 minutes after I got off the last time. Well, thanks a lot for tuning in. I hope that we've got an audience here to listen to what I think should be a fascinating conversation today with Shelton Taguma, who's originally from Zimbabwe and is working with Forgotten Voices, where he is the executive director. This is a Christian charity located, excuse me here. Sorry about that, folks. Got a little frog there. A Christian charity located here in central Pennsylvania. And we met several months ago. Fascinating story. I didn't even realize that they were very close to where I lived. And they're right down the road. I drove by their offices many times, only to find out belatedly that this organization existed and was doing some great work in Zimbabwe. Sorry, folks, I'm stuck there. But my guest today, as I said, is Shelton Taguma, and I'm going to welcome him into the stream right now. Shelton, welcome to the stream today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. I'm so glad to be part of your show.
Well, it is a great pleasure, and I'm looking at your office there, and I'm looking a little envious there because I'm getting so used to seeing mine that I like that look. It's a lovely office you have there. Looks like there's an elephant on the middle shelf in the back there.
Oh yeah, no, there's a couple of elephants and I have a giraffe there. Just a little reminder of back home, and as much as I can, this is the girls' playroom, so they've got all of their books all over my stuff.
Well, speaking of back home, so to let people know, you are originally from Zimbabwe, correct?
Yes, so originally Zimbabwe, born and raised in Bulawayo, but my family is Shona, and when we talk of rural home, my rural home will be Gokwe area. So, but I was born and raised in Bulawayo, and lived there for most of my life. Yeah.
Now, before we get any further, I should let my international audience know that you've pointed out something. I don't think it was intentionally, but you've pointed out something that's very African, and that's whether you're Black African or you're Indian or Indian Asian or you're white or you're Arab. When you ask Africans where they're from, they never tell you where they're from. They tell you where their parents are from, and that's what you just did, correct?
Yeah, yes, correct. So when I talk of like where is home, when someone asks me where is home, it's never like, oh, I stay in the city. You always talk of where you say, this is home where my rural, where my grandparents are, because that's where you always associate your home with. So.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and you really confused me here. For those who know a little bit about Zimbabwe, when Shelton says Bulawayo and then he tells me Shona, I'm like, huh? That doesn't make any sense. Isn't that in the heart of Matabele land, where all the Ndebele live?
Yeah, it is. It is. So my family, my grandfather worked at a railway station, so he kind of moved, and then he was stationed up in the Bulawayo area, which is where my family ended up kind of moving. So we kind of grew up there. So Ndebele became part of who we are. That's now even some say my Ndebele is better than my Shona, because that's what I kind of grew up speaking, that you can't even tell apart when you hear my surname, like, oh, are you, So yeah, so that's kind of an interesting twist there.
Well, for those in the know, the surname is a kind of a giveaway. It is definitely not an Ndebele name, so that kind of throws people off.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But what subset of the Shona is your family? They're not Cesaru, are they?
No, I think we are from. Let's see if I get the lineage right. I think there is a mix of Zezuru, and then there is a mix of the group in I think in Mutare side. So which I can't even remember what they are. The lineage fully is, because they moved around quite a bit. So to actually pinpoint to say, oh yeah, we are only the Zulu, or we are, the other side, it's hard to tell.
Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like your family moved around for employment, seeking opportunities. I think your grandfather, you said, was on the railroads. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, I've been to Bulawayo several times. It's actually one of my favorite places in Zimbabwe, which I think is kind of funny because, let's be honest, the town is not that particularly interesting architecturally or anything like that. But there's just a vibe in Bulawayo. I always found it an interesting place to be.
Yeah, no, it is home, and we thought, we thought it was the place to be, and we just loved the City of Kings, and even in its smallness, there was so much life. If you knew the places to go, the city center might look a bit smaller, but compared to Harare, but there were some really neat places that the city hall, Hafelis, and when you talk of the one mall that we had, but it was still it was still a happening place. So there is and when you go outside the main CBD, you have Ascot, you had all these other different places which really had some really cool uniqueness to the city in itself. Yeah.
It's interesting because I was in Bulawayo for the first time in 2000, and the central business district, which you're referring to, I kind of had the feeling like it was stuck in time. It could be 1980 almost, is how it felt. I mean, that's not a derogatory statement. It just kind of had that dusty, rural, bucolic town village sort of feel to it. But it's a big city.
It is a huge city, yeah, and I mean, these you still see kind of like some historical buildings when you go to the post office, or when you go to the city hall. You still kind of see the remnants of British buildings, but also this newer kind of buildings that have been there, the malls that are coming up. But yeah, no, they still is. It's a really interesting mix of a city, but I love the people there, and I love the vibe that it still has today. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I've known lots of Zimbabweans from all ethnic groups, whether the Kalanga or the former Rhodesians or white Zimbabweans or Ndebele or Shona. I've found I don't know, it seems like a special affinity with the people from Matabele, and no matter who they are, the ethnic origin. I don't know, it's just something about the way people live their lives there. I'm going to guess that you probably, as a child, at least once made a trip to Matopos National Park. Have you been down there?
Oh yeah, no, I worked a lot with an organization that actually had a campsite in the Matopos area. So we did a lot of stuff outside in Matopo National Park, and just some adventuring, even with local groups, just trying to expose some of the young people who normally wouldn't go to Matopos as a or have access to the Matopos, but there were special trips that we used to kind of host for young people, just to show, what the outdoors is, or what, they can enjoy even close by. Some of the young people in the townships, like, never know those things, or they kind of see them on TV, but they don't have access to it. So I worked with an organization that did that. So I actually traveled. It's one of my favorite places, just the scenery, and just like even the whole geography that's happening there. It's pretty unique to the area.
Absolutely. Well, there's a question here very quickly. I'll digress because it's an important answer, I think, from Werkzeug Schlagzeug. I guess uses a German name. But he says, what are the literacy rates there? Well, listen, while I'm an outspoken critic of Robert Gabriel Mugabe and ZANU-PF, whom I consider to be a thugocracy, that's a personal view. While I'm outspoken critics of both him and that organization, I will give them credit for something that was very successful in the early years of ZANU-PF's reign or rule in Zimbabwe. They took an education system that was functional. It may not have met the needs of all Black Africans, but it was functional, and they turned it into a very effective education system at the primary and secondary level. So as a consequence, literacy rates in Zimbabwe are through the roof. They're over 95%, higher than that, in fact. And you find if you're looking for talented, you're looking for human capital, look to Zimbabweans. Now, you'll find a lot of them at Canary Wharf in London in the financial services business. You'll find them in South Africa. You'll find them here in the U.S. One case in point right here. Shelton is here in the U.S., Zimbabwean. Not necessarily having the opportunity in Zimbabwe for a variety of reasons. But, yeah, literacy is quite high in Zimbabwe. So, Shelton, did you go to a public school? Did you go to a boarding school? What was your primary and secondary education like in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, so my my education was a mix of things. So I grew up in, I grew up in Bulawayo, but I went to what we'll call township school. So it was a public school in Ngeta, which is like outside, outside of the main city, in a township location of Nkulumane. So I grew up there, and then I went to Ngeta Secondary School. And yeah, it was a very mix of stuff. My primary school since my family moved a lot, we started in Gampo Primary School, and then I went to, Ganwini, and then from Ganwini I went to Getza Secondary School. So from there, I had my fair share of, concentrating in school and, doing my own shenanigans just because I was a teenage boy who had his own issues. But then I had the opportunity to, finish my O levels. Later on, I went and finished my O levels and rewrote my O's. And then I was just kind of really focused on, okay, what do I need to do to better myself? So there was an idea of like, okay, school is the only way that you can do that. So after that, after I wrote my O levels, and then UNISA, because again, my family situation, I was not able to have, my family was not able to send me to a local university. So we did long distance university. So University of South Africa had some really good courses that I was interested in youth development work. So I started there, and I had kind of just people who helped me kind of go through while I was working. I was also learning. And from there, that's really started this hunger to learn more and to develop my understanding of what was happening around me and how best to respond to, to the social economic issues that were happening in my community. So really understanding that from youth development to community development. And then later on, finished kind of like, I did an associate's degree, and then I moved on to my bachelor's degree from there. So this was all in, while I was still in Zim and kind of doing UNISA on the side. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I actually, back in the 1980s, wrote to University of South Africa, UNISA. I was actually going to go there and attend university there, but I decided to go back to Ohio University, which is where I'd started when I was a freshman. But yeah, UNISA has had a well-known distance education program for a very long time. And so I've also done distance education, but not at the undergraduate level. I did it at the graduate level, one of my master's programs. So it's a challenge, isn't it? It's not an easy thing to do. People look at it and go, oh, it's easy. It's not. You've got to be motivated. You've got to be focused, and you've got to get it done. And you do miss out on some things that you would get in residence.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think what it offers, though, and I know that nowadays there's more other local local universities that have come up, Africa Open University or Zimbabwe Open University. And I think at that time, what was affordable, and also to say, what is, continue with the reputable, education. For me, it felt like, okay, the courses that I wanted to do and what I could afford, it felt like it was easier for me to do, via UNISA, rather than where, at that time, that was kind of like the best opportunity for me to go. But it wasn't easy because, again, you were really giving up a lot. And as you said, like you need to have the drive yourself to say, I'm going to get this done, because when everyone is having a good time and you are like, hey guys, I gotta go, do this. So really finding that balance too is really something that it takes drive, it takes persuasion, and I think also you need a support system, around you, people that are like, hey dude, you can do this, because from my background, there was a lot of self-doubt too, to say, do I have what it takes to really, who do I think I am, to kind of go through this? But actually, I'm grateful for those who stood by me and who were supportive in that moment to say, hey, education is really a good pillar for you to, if you're going to do anything, start here, So from there on, I've kind of done my graduate school here in the US to just diversify my experience and also the delivery of the program. In the US, I did a full, in-person experience, which was different from all of my, kind of like distant learning. So that was kind of like a different break from there. Yeah.
No, that's got to be a very different experience. Now, let's see. Of course, in my case, I had done resident undergraduate and associate's degree,
Yeah.
and then I also did distance. I also did the weird thing of correspondence, where I did a couple courses of correspondence at the University of the States when I was in the uniform, and then I also did nights and weekends, which is a really awkward way to do education. You spend 8 hours a day in a class on a weekend. Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
But so I've seen all these different things. But I've never. Done my first in-class experience as a graduate student. That must have been daunting when you first tried. And you came to America. I mean, that had to be. To tell us a little bit about that. You came to the States. Listen, people don't really know what the States is around the world, and I think you could probably attest to this because they think they have this image, whether it's from Hollywood or it's from the popular media, and then they go to America and it's not at all what they expected. I mean, it's often a lot more than they expected. But tell us a little bit about that experience, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, it was an interesting. I think from the very beginning, I moved to the States during winter, which is a no-no. Don't ever do that. If you
So wait a second. So Shelton, your advice to an African is not to move to America in the middle of the winter. It's funny you should mention that because many years ago, an officer from Botswana came to visit me, and they sent him here in January. He didn't have a coat. I'm like, dude, there's like 2 feet of snow on the ground. Who sends you from Africa without a coat? So I had to give him a coat.
No, it was really bad. So we actually moved during December, so before Christmas, and oh yeah, no, it will be okay. It's middle of summer. It's middle of summer in Africa. So I leave traveling in airplane. I'm told that it's gonna spend a couple of hours in the airplane. So yeah, I put on my shorts. I put on my flip flops. It's like it's not, I love to travel. Simple and comfortable, on the plane. So the person I was traveling with, you might want to think about that. Just keep some warm clothes on. And we were going to the West Coast, so Boise, Idaho, which is very cold. And they had kind of just received one of their worst storms of that year. And then, we make a stop, in Salt Lake City, and I see all these people, man, they are wearing all these massive jackets, and what is going on here, man? And I come out of the plane, and just the wind just hit, man. It's like I never felt that cold, like cold in the bone. It's like, man. So anyway, I had to change. So that was the first welcome to America. Everyone was wearing massive coats, and I'm like, this is not what I thought of, and but after, fast forward a couple of years, the experience is different. Things are twice as big, and it's not always Hollywood as you think that everyone is driving a massive car, and the way, there's some real people with real experiences and with real issues. But then again, if you ever go to the mall, again, be prepared to have just a culture shock of just too many choices. I never know that finding bread, you will have massive, massive choices of just buying white bread and brown bread. So that was, a point of adjustment, just knowing wow, there's so much choices. But at the same time, the learning experience for me was just, learning how to live in the States, but then also learning to change my worldview to say what I thought of the States is not always, true from the TV, because again, I met some amazing people here, and the experience was difficult, very different from where I come from, but at the same time, I think it just made me appreciate the world much more. Because it expanded my worldview to say, things happen in a different way. When I used to watch movies and you see someone being able to kick a wall of, feasting the wall, and you never do that in Zimbabwe, hitting a wall of, brick mortar, because in my head, when I thought of homes built of bricks. So I thought, oh yeah, in America, that's what they do. But then when you start really looking, their homes are built in a different way. So when a rain season comes, or when a wind blows, you start seeing, because I never used to understand, how come, storms in America, we have storms in Africa, and the damage is different from what I see on TV. It's changed my perspective. It's a small things like that that help me to appreciate, like, things are done differently for a reason. So even back home, we build the homes the way we do because of our weather patterns and because of just the way things are done there. And so those are some of the small things that really helped me to appreciate, or even just like a rude awakening for me, like what you thought is not always the truth. So anyway, that's a big answer there for you.
No, but that's a fascinating point. I know someone from Africa who looks down their nose at American houses on a first trip to the States going, why do you people live in planks? Well, what is that all about? Why are your houses made out of wood? Well, there's a lot of reasons why the houses are made out of wood. And by the way, they're not all made out of wood. That's just the common, because it's quick to build. It's an abundant resource, and it's easy to expand something like that. But we have plenty of brick homes and stone homes. But for someone from parts of Africa down your way are accustomed to having houses made out of stone or brick, they're like, what is this nonsense? And so we also don't have termites in the way that people have them in Africa.
No.
So you can have wood, and you don't have to worry about it being eaten alive and the house collapsing on you from termites. Now, in some parts of America, we do have termites, but there are methods to stop that. So yeah, it's a question of what building materials are around, because building a house out of stone is quite expensive. It takes a lot of stone, a lot of effort. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, that's a small thing, but it's a good point for you to bring up there, because a lot of people, they just miss that completely. I had a friend of mine who went to l'École d'État Major, the staff college in Tunisia, with me, and when I was there 20 years ago, gosh. And he was an intelligence officer, which he denied. Of course, we all knew he was an intelligence officer, but he was wearing insignia that said that he was an administrative officer. And we're like, yeah, okay, fine. So we won't talk around him because he's a spy. Anyway, so we had fun with that. And then lo and behold, a few years later, I find myself stationed in America, and I get a cryptic email message from someone. And it turns out it's him. He's now attending the Defense Intelligence Agency Foreign Intelligence Officers course in D.C., but then again, he wasn't an intelligence officer. Anyway, but so back to the point of the story. Even though he went to university in Tunisia and was a subject matter expert on America, he came to America and he thought that Americans weren't people of faith. And I'm like, oh, my brother, you don't understand America at all. This country is 85% of the people are people of faith. About 70% arguably are devout and regular churchgoers. And while those numbers have been declining in the last couple of decades, they're largely consistently true. Now, it's overwhelmingly Christianity, but even Jews and Muslims in this country and others are people of faith. And faith plays a big role in America, does it not?
Yeah, it does. And I think I think for me that was also a big learning experience, because just even the size of, even though you see the church buildings, just because, the building is big, there is some churches that are big and people come, but also there is a lot of, just because of the way of life here, just because people are not going to church, it does not mean that they don't have a faith. There's a different ways of expressing that I have learned, that it is okay for people to even meet at church, at their home, and just, it's like, yeah, I'm practicing my faith. Just because I'm not going to church, it does not mean that I have, I don't have a faith. While back home, your faith was kind of expressed by you participating in community of faith and going to a church and, literally being connected, to a church. That when you talked of, I attend church, and they always ask, like, which one? That you needed to be associated with a geographic church, or like, I go to this big church. Oh yeah, I know that one, for them to kind of see that. But so those are some of the things I think that from a cultural perspective, it is different. You start seeing things expressed in a different way, just again, because the way of life is totally different here, and people's, work schedules are different. That it's not always Sunday. For me, it was surprising to hear that, we do main services on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It's like, why do you do that? We normally do prayer meetings on that day, So anyway, all of that is to say that faith is really a big part of people's life here, and it is expressed differently. And there is not so many rules and guidelines that sometimes we have seen from a culture that integrates faith and also uses guidelines as a way of, holding back that you can't do this, you can't do this. Yet here, there is an expression that my faith is something that I hold on to dearly in my heart. But then there's certain things that, I'm open about to say, oh, I could be found or eating in a place or takeaway that is a bar. That in some places in Africa, when you say you're a Christian, when you are seen in a compromising place that is not normally called Christian, then they start questioning your faith. Like, are you really a Christian because of that? So that is just one example that, again, it's helped me appreciate faith in a different way than before. But faith really does and is a big deal here than I thought. Yeah.
No, it really is, and I'm going to have fun here in a second. Use the host prerogative for a comment that one of my viewers put in there, but not related to you, Shelton. Don't worry about it. It's not, but I'm just going to have a little fun with it. But what I want to say is that in my case, I rarely find myself in a church, although I did as a young man. I was baptized and went to church, but rarely go to church. But as I tell people, that doesn't mean I'm not a person of faith. I mean, to me, a church is a place where a community goes to share in the experience of faith. But you can have a belief in a deity and have a personal relationship with that deity that doesn't involve ever going to church, and that's perfectly acceptable. And that was a rare view in America. The description of faith that you talk about in Africa and Zimbabwe in particular is kind of how America was back in the 50s. But the 60s kind of changed things. A lot of people moved away from faith, and others started experiencing their faith in different fashions. So we still have a lot of people go to church. I mean, I remember when I went to Europe as a young man in the Army, I was astounded. I thought that Europe, because I grew up thinking Europe was full of people of faith because, Catholicism and the Protestant Reformation and all these people. And then I get there and I go to churches in Europe and they're empty. No one's there. Because they're a bunch of heathens. But seriously, a lot of secular folks in Europe these days who don't go to church, whereas in America, which a lot of people who've never been here don't understand, is a deeply faithful society. It really is the case, and I'm not advocating for or against faith. I'm just stating facts.
Yeah.
So let me have a little fun with what I was going to do. So Chris Redlingshoy says the houses in America, for the most part, are a bit of cock, made of wood and paper, and they all look the same. Well, Chris, I would submit to you that houses in South Africa are a bit of cock too. They're all made from tin and they're on illegally occupied private land. So yeah, they're all cock too in South Africa. Sorry, that was a little host freedom there. I'm having fun with Chris, but there are 330 million Americans, 50 states, a country the size of the Sahara Desert almost. I think that we have a variety of houses. I've been to virtually every one of the lower 48, and I can attest that while there are a lot of similar houses, we have some very unique houses. And again, it all comes down to money, and it also comes down to resources available at hand. So we got a couple comments here real quick, and then we'll shift gears and start talking about forgotten voices. Brett says, what's your thought? Oh, he's asking me, what's the thought of your guest about the corruption in Africa? Also, the way many African leaders embezzle funds and live luxuriously while blaming Africa's problems on colonialism. Ouch. I don't know if you want to address that. Shelton, do you have any thoughts about corruption in Africa? That's not really what we asked you to come on for, but you're welcome to share.
No, I think it is a big deal, and we have experience. And as I said, I grew up in Zim, and I have seen, I've seen this play out in different ways. Like the thought of getting or going to a government office or dealing with any authority whatsoever becomes like something that you dread. Like if you needed to go to a passport office and you're just like, oh man, like these things that I grew up experiencing. And I know that if we are to move to a different place as a continent, I can say just as an African that I think the desire is that this is an issue or a cancer that we need to address, and we need to be honest about to say it is there. It is there. I can talk about, in Zim at this time to say there are so many people who have, who are well-meaning and who are really wanting to do life for not only for themselves, run a business in a most, credible way, but then there is a system that is around them that is already compromised, that no matter how much they're trying to do something right, they're always kind of brought to their knees because of the system that we have accepted and we're not been willing to address. So I think as a fellow African, that I think there is some things that we need to change and address and take ownership of as people group, things that we have, you know, turned a blind eye, but then now it has become something big that now we're like, it's too big for us to fix. But actually, I think we need to be, we need to be honest about that. But we're not going to move forward until we fix it, because it will always find a way of, coming and affecting us or limiting the progress that we're trying to do. I'm sad when I hear stories or see what is happening in Zim, and you're like, man, what is going on home? What is the issue? And I'm not on there like, just because I'm in the US, I'm now seeing or pinpointing stuff. No, I have family. I'm still have invested and committed to see my country do well. And there's no doubt about that. But also I recognize the weaknesses that are existing in Zim, whether it is from the people that we have made and we have accepted these things for a long time, or whether we just didn't know or how to address these issues much more than in other places. So I think this is something that is a big deal, that every leader from every different sectors of our economy, or even every person, needs to be aware of and not make it easy. And I think that might be an easy statement for me to say because I'm not home now, but at the same time, I think I'm really committed in seeing a difference back home, that I feel like we need to be open about this. So that would be my comment apart from, on that.
Well, that's actually a good segue. Folks, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel here on YouTube on a lovely, what is it, Wednesday, Shelton? Is it Wednesday today? Wednesday,
Yeah.
Wednesday, the 18th of November. I'm sorry, I'm kind of lost. My days are running together. As you know, I was in Ohio this week to visit my mother, who is not doing well in hospital. But apparently she's doing well this morning. Some good news from my sister. Good to hear after her surgery yesterday. So she's got her appetite. That's good. But so I kind of lost track of what day it was. But you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel. My special feature guest is Shelton Taguma, who is originally from Zimbabwe but lives here in central Pennsylvania. God's country, central Pennsylvania, the land where the Amish, the Mennonites are all around us here. It's quite fascinating from a cultural standpoint, and we can get to that in just a second. But I think it's a good transition point here, a good segue into talking about forgotten voices. But before we go there, Shelton, have you encountered the Amish or the Mennonites here? And if you did so, was that a culture shock for you? It is for most Americans.
It is. It was really a culture shock, but then also there was some cool point of connection. I think their love for growing stuff, and having my background from Gokwe, that land is always part of what you do. Growing animals, just their way of life. Really, like there were some things like, oh man, like real cheese, like real pickle stuff. So like all of these things that I appreciated about them, but really totally different, really different culture altogether. So living in the midst of that, and actually even living in close proximity to fresh produce for me has been like, wow, that's amazing, But I've really appreciated just kind of like some of the advantages of being in this area, and access to fresh foods, and also access to a different culture that really is living in almost like, they're almost in communities themselves that, there's all these ways of living and doing life that, it's always fun for me while I'm driving to see, a horse-drawn, budgie. It's like, but that's amazing. In this day and age, you're seeing people, they have stuck to their traditions in a very strong way, which has been it's been an amazing thing to learn and to see that happening in this area.
Well, what I've always found fascinating about the Amish, of course, because I have some ethnic German background. I've been fluent in German for 35 years. But for me, even growing up with the Amish, is they're a cultural group that's retained their cultural distinctiveness, yet they've integrated into society in the ways that matter, contributed to our society, yet retain their cultural distinctiveness, primarily starting with their language. The Amish almost all still speak German. Of course, it's a funny German from the 17th century, so for some people it's a little hard to follow. But when I speak modern standard German with them, High German, German, Hochdeutsch, they understand me. I just have to listen to what they say very carefully until they switch. But also, they're deep people of faith. That's why they're here. They escaped religious persecution in Europe, and they came to Pennsylvania originally and started right there in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Now they're all the way out to the West Coast. They're out past Idaho now into Canada. And another thing is, Shelton, a lot of people don't realize that that they think the Amish were the original group and the Mennonites broke away from them, but it's the opposite, actually. The Amish thought that the Mennonites were too liberal and too willing to adapt to society, and they weren't following the right path. So the Amish broke away from the Mennonites, which is interesting. Also, there were 5,000 of them, both groups total, in the United States in 1900. Today, there are 750,000 Amish and Mennonites in the United States and Canada, most in the U.S. Very prolific folks with large families. But anyway, so there was a question here from Ginaldo Rose. I guess we'll get this very quickly before we get to Forgotten Voices. But Ginaldo Rose says, Shelton, do you miss Zimbabwe? Fair question. And would you consider returning if the conditions in the country improve for the people to thrive? I think the second question is probably he'll go back to visit, but his life is here now. But I'll let you answer those two questions on your own.
Yeah, no, Zim is home, and as I said, I have all my whole family is still there. So for me, it's not a question of will I go back? It's when will you go back? It's at this time I'm privileged. As we will talk about Forgotten Voices, the organization I work for now, that we still work there. So I get to go there about 3 times in a year. So the thing of like really moving and settling there, is really a different story to say, when will the time be okay for us to say, okay, you know what, I'm invested and I want to go recircle home. I think there is still a desire to, if things change, I think there is a desire to go back. But when will things change? That's another thing. And also the question I always ask is like, for my family or for my livelihood, do I have opportunities here to build and connect home from this end rather than me living at home? For my family, I've had conversation with my mom. It was like, well, just come back home. Or no, don't come back home. Just stay there. It is easier for you to be there than for you to be here. Because when you are here, then because I've become almost a safety net for my family, being here, because now there is a steady flow of income that is not compromised for them rather than me being home. So I feel like there is really this weird area of like, when will be the best time for me to get home? My desire is, I miss home every time. And as we're talking about the Amish, one thing that I've loved about the Amish is that they've provided me with sausages, the bruvos, that it's not the same, but it is almost close to home. It is close enough to just, quench that desire when I'm feeling like, oh man, I miss home. I visit one of their butcheries and they have like, the German style sausages that's almost, it's close. The recipe is close enough to brewers that I can eat my salsa with that, and it is decent enough, to just quench that miss for home. So. Yeah.
Wow, that's a good answer. Thanks for sharing that. So other questions, I'm going to hold off on them because we want to talk about Forgotten Voices. So we've spent about a half hour getting to know you and learning about you, and I think that most of the audience is pretty fascinated. But we're going to talk about Forgotten Voices now. On your website, it says there are over 4.1 million orphan children in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. We're on a mission to care for those precious kids. Well, tell us about this Christian charity, Forgotten Voices, Shelton, of which you are the executive director currently, correct?
Yes, yeah. So I'm the executive director of Forgotten Voices, and what Forgotten Voices is a response to a gap that we were seeing in this space of orphan care. Mostly you see big organizations that come in and they establish projects and programs to address certain crisis in communities, and sometimes they leave out participation of local entities, and that even after their programming is done, they kind of upgrade and move. So if, for instance, in Zim, when things started becoming difficult, we saw massive big organizations move their bases outside Zimbabwe, again leaving local entities in a vulnerable state. So what Forgotten Voices has been doing for the last 15 years is partnering with local churches and using the local churches, saying, the local church is the entity that is not moving. They have been here for a long time. They're still there in community. But also we're seeing that the local church in itself, it also is a respected authority in talking about moral things or responding to a crisis or emergency within the community. So us as an organization, we believe that partnering with the church to empower families to meet, the emotional, spiritual, and physical needs of children, orphaned by HIV/AIDS or just vulnerable children because of the extreme poverty, is the answer to address some of this issue of orphan crisis in this region. So Forgotten Voices was started by a pastor who had gone to Zimbabwe, visiting the Theological College of Zimbabwe. And as he was talking to the pastors there, and what they brought forward was that, we have been doing some things in our community, but then we have some of these nonprofits or big NGOs that never listen to us. They come and they establish their things and they kind of do their own thing, and they just want to use us, but they never really listen to us. So he then kind of came back and he was really thinking through what is the best and meaningful way of, building the capacity of those entities or the churches to be able to be effective in how they respond. So then we started in Zimbabwe, and then it then grew from Zimbabwe. We moved to Zambia, and then from Zambia, we've moved to Malawi. And these three countries are the most vulnerable in the region, if I can say, because of the issues of HIV/AIDS, or the numbers that are increasing of HIV/AIDS, but also we see the level of poverty that is still there in this country. So the 4.1 that we say is a combined number of all these three countries, and these are estimated numbers that now, with some of our statistics, they've not been improved. And we think that that number is even much more than that, because they are numbers that we still don't know. When you really get into the hard to reach areas, there's some statistics that we really are not, that they're not easy for us to find. But that's the number that we're saying estimates that are, professionally and used by other entities in the space tell us that there is about 4.1. And our desire is that we want to see these children in experiencing the love, the love of God, the security of a family, church, and community, because we're saying that in order to break this cycle of this cycle of poverty, we need to fully empower families. In other places, when children are vulnerable, they are taken from their families to institutions. And we're seeing that the institutions, they always taking kids to institutions it's not working well. It doesn't work well in the other countries. When I compare the issue here, like in the States, kids are not taken into these institutions, but then we have, trying to kind of put kids into homes, into a family setting. So what Forgotten Voices is doing is partnering with the church so that the church can identify those children, those orphaned children or those vulnerable children in their communities, and then empowering families or guidance that are looking after these kids to be empowered so that they can meet the needs of the kids, so that we don't have kids being moved from home setup to an institution. And we know that even the institutions that we have in these countries, they're not equipped well enough. Where we have these economic challenges, particularly in Zim, that there's so many families who are vulnerable. Or even when you talk of the institutions that are trying to do their best to care and serve this, this population, they are really struggling hard. And we know that research too is showing that institutions are not the greatest place. They should kind of work for a certain time, but they shouldn't be the long-term solution to this crisis. The long-term solution should be best in a family setup. So our idea and our model to orphan care is that we partner with local churches. So we say we are church-based, we are family, we are family focused, and we are child driven, that our interventions are really wanting to see the well-being of a child improved, so that they could grow up to be, a responsible adult, make wise decisions as they are making, choices for their families. So that's kind of what Forgotten Voices does. So we partner with churches, and our partnership runs for about 5 years with each church, and then we provide training to these local churches. So this will be a pastor, and then there will be a couple of leaders within this community that we say, hey, let's walk you through a capacity building process where we equip, we find out what already is existing in that community. Then we figure out from our experience as an organization and from our partnership with global entities or other national entities to find, gaps that we can fulfill through training, and also through providing small grants to help the church fulfill its plans in community. So building capacity, and then the church identifies the needs within their community, and they build what we call a custom plan. Okay, so for instance, a church in Nkulumane, a township, can look around this community and say, well, we have identified 15 families or 15 orphaned children that are vulnerable at this time. And we would love to maybe pay for them or help pay school fees for these kids, or maybe also provide, if they need medical, support, help provide some, form of support to help them, medical. But also we look at the emotional side to say, do these kids, have they been have they been exposed to any trauma of any kind, or did they lose parents, and were they able to grieve their parents well? So there's a portion where which we call psychosocial support, where we are trying to help, these kids address the traumas that they have experienced, so that they are able to, to move well. So the custom plan includes all these different comprehensive, interventions that we start, helping the church to empower families to do that. And then our end game is always looking at the long-term sustainability of these families, because we don't want these families to end up being dependent on the local church, which sometimes happens. So we are always looking at other ways or interventions that we can start, including for this family to be self-sustainable. Because I know that the dignity that families need, or that a caregiver needs to say, I am able to pay for my own child to, to go to school. That's a deep felt issue that we have experienced, that for any parent, no parent is happy saying, well, my child is being taken care by this so-and-so organization. Every parent wants to do that for their child. But then we know that some don't have that capacity. So equipping or empowering these families to say, here is a skill, or learn sewing, or learn how to do this, or here is a small grant, financial grant that will help you start a tomato business, or go buy, some things to sell at the market, so that you are able to start providing for a family. So that's what we kind of offer at Forgotten Voices. And we work through the local churches, kind of our setup. And the idea is that by strengthening the local church, we are then able to look at the long-term, that's a long-term solution, that the church is now, able to continue providing this safety net for families. So that's what Forgotten Voices is doing, and, in these 3 countries.
Well, it's interesting because those 3 countries just happen to, ironically, be the former Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. So there is a shared history there that goes back even before that for Zambia, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. So that's interesting. But there's some nice things people are saying about this and about you, Shelton, in the chat. Walk in Beauty said that God bless you, Shelton, for your works helping the precious children. Some really nice things people are saying there. There's a few other nice comments. You talk about something here, this phenomenon of orphans in Zimbabwe. Eric Kuzik just subscribed. Thank you for subscribing, Eric. Kea Leboa. But this is not something that Zimbabweans are accustomed to. I mean, this phenomenon of orphans is a relatively new phenomenon. I mean, in 1988, you didn't have this issue. In 1998, you didn't have this issue. Not until the farm invasions took place and afterwards did this really. I mean, HIV was coming to the front. We were learning about it, and people were becoming HIV orphans by the late 1990s, but not on this level. It wasn't until the farm invasions and the economy was destroyed that you see what you see now. And when you talk about orphans, I mean, look, we have single parents in the stream who are watching, and bless them for the effort they try to do raising their children. But single parent families are not ideal. It's best to have a two-parent family, particularly a nuclear family. And if nothing else, for load sharing, sharing the burden of raising the children, take a break and, give the other person time. But when you have so many orphans, this must have a deleterious impact on society. I mean, you've talked about kids being in institutions. That can't be healthy for society, for the long-term sustainability and for the proper maturation of children. Is this a concern? I'm sure it's a concern for you, but is it a concern in Zimbabwe, or is it just, charities that care about it?
No, I think there is a growing concern for it because, again, when you add different layers, apart from HIV/AIDS, once you add on the layer of political and even economic stability in these areas, that adds a different layer of, of an issue in society. Because what we are seeing, particularly in Zimbabwe, is that you have vulnerable children, which is why we normally talk of orphaned and vulnerable children, that it's not just because your parent died doesn't mean that you're vulnerable. And I think sometimes they are single parents who are taking care of kids and they're doing it in an amazing way. But then there's also issues that are extreme where you have a single parent who the husband has moved to South Africa to find a job, and they have gone AWOL. They're not. There's no money that is being sent. No support that is coming back home. So now this single parent who's been left, or sometimes it's a grandmother that for these couples that will say, we're trying to find better opportunities to support our families. We will do the trip, and then we will go outside and then we'll do what we can. Now you are left with this single parent or single guardian or caregiver trying to do all they can with limited resources to care for, these vulnerable children that they've been left with. And we've seen that there is huge cases, or even increasing numbers, where we are seeing older generation that we're looking at just retiring or staying in the rural areas, but then suddenly they are they're taking care of the grandkids because the children are trying to go look for better, economic situations. And so society-wise, that's already adding more stress to a very vulnerable or fragile situation where there is no safety net. The safety net that used to be there before, because, as I said, this was never something that our culture recognized, that there was never an orphan, because if my young brother died, it was my responsibility as an older brother to take care of that. So we never used to have the term, orphans, even though it was used, it was never like, it was something that the family was taking care of. But then once we start adding this whole economic situation on top of this, you are starting to see families that used to be okay looking after other people, or that they had a system to say, you know what, this person can come and stay with me. I will be able to just send them to school just like I'm sending my kids. But then once you add the economic tensions, it just makes it very, very complex. And you start seeing the levels of abuse, level of kids being brought in from extended families, and all they're doing is to now work as maids or do all of the things, or they don't have the same treatment. So child abuse and exploitation starts skyrocketing within these families, because these children are within their care, or you start seeing increased numbers of runaways, children running away from these homes to say, you know what, I would rather live in the street because this living with my uncle is more dangerous than what I thought it is. So there is really this issue is complex, and you have to kind of look at it from one family to the other. But as an issue of our society, it is really affecting our society in a different way than before.
No, Helene Prince just subscribed. Thank you, Helene, for subscribing to the channel. A couple questions I want to get to. That's a great point. You know, it's interesting because here in America, people have these misperceptions about America and misconceptions. And they often talk about, we already talked about the question of faith and people not realizing how many people of faith are in this country. But another is that, you know, America is disconnected. Family doesn't matter. It's unimportant. That is so far from the truth that it's ludicrous that people even think that abroad, but many do. But the situation you just talked about, my father's generation, it was the norm for the uncles or the aunts to take in a child if the parents were lost. That was just the norm. You did that. We didn't have many of these care homes for kids and institutionalization and foster homes. That came later. It always existed, but it was never major. And it seems like society, the further we go into the future, the more we lose that was valuable from our past. And that's unfortunate because it's not an ideal situation. There's two things I'd like to get to very quickly, Shelton, because we're going to run out of time here shortly, is that what I like about your organization, Forgotten Voices, is that you, like a lot of others, you don't deal directly with the government. You're not giving money to the government to take care of people because we know where that's going to go. You deal directly with the providers who can actually provide it, and you make an agreement, work with them. And if they don't deliver, you move on. You don't stick with them. You cut the ties with someone who doesn't get the job done. So you're dealing with providers to achieve the goal that you're hoping to make happen, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So the idea is that we empower entities that are there to make an impact, and that's not only immediate, but that will have a long-term influence in that community. So we have other service providers and local networks that we work with that we bring into the play, and sometimes governments are carrying too much. That the moment you start kind of going through them, it starts getting all complicated. So we're always saying, okay, where could we invest that will have the maximum impact? And it's very grassroots too, because then we, having to go through this whole processes of like, oh, we need to pass through this, and then it just makes accountability more complex. So when we work with direct, providers, it just allows us that we also can report back to the people that are supporting us to say, hey, here is what you're doing, really making an impact. So it makes it easy for us to track rather than making the process complicated. So that's been a point of our model to kind of just.
No, that's an excellent. It's a business model. You're not a business, but it's a business model. I like it. Donna Riley Donnerism says that my house is like a train station. My kids are always finding strays who don't have both parents in their homes. She says no complaints though. Well, bless your heart there, Donna, for letting kids hang around your house. It's always a challenge. So now, Shelton, let me talk about the vulgar topic of money. You're a charity, and so you can't exist in thin air. Obviously, you do fundraising. What a lot of people don't know is they talk about Americans, and they like to look to the Scandinavians and go, the Scandinavians are so generous. They give 1% of their GDP in charity every year. No, the Scandinavians don't. Their governments give away 1% of the money they fleeced from the citizens. That's not generosity. That's the government trying to look good. And while it does achieve something, in many respects, in my view, it's virtue signaling. The United States spends about $45 to $50 billion a year on foreign assistance. Some of that's on military aid. So some of that's on helping people eat, keep people from starving, PEPFAR, things like that. But Americans are the most generous people in the world. We give over $500 billion to charities every single year, even in years when times are lean for Americans. And some of that money finds its way to Africa. So let me ask, Shelton, how do you guys fundraise? And is there anything we can do to maybe help if people are interested in helping Forgotten Voices out?
Yeah. So our fundraising is done in we would call it an integrated fundraising approach. We have partners and supporters that give towards our work from the US. And then we also try to grow our fundraising efforts, even locally, to find ways that we encourage giving at a local level. So we have that kind of those two out-facing fundraising approach. So on our websites, we have very simple ways of connecting if people are really interested in supporting what we do. And we have breakdowns of, here's what we do. If you want to support, go on our website, and there's instructions there on, forgottenvoices.org. And there's instructions there that really kind of connect you to say, here is ways of how you can support and connect with us. And if you want to learn more information about, how we work, the number of partners, all of that stuff is provided on our website. But I would like to emphasize just the point that you made about just the kind of just how giving, how Americans are givers. Like it's a crazy thing for me. Like in the midst of this COVID, I can say this has been a difficult year for many people. But what we have seen is that even more, we have seen supporters and givers within the United States, stepping up to not only focus on their families, but then to focus on others, to say, yes, I might be, things might be hard for me, but I want to give to make sure that someone else is giving. So it is true that Americans have a giving heart. And we have seen that as an organization, because 90% of all of our, of our support is kind of out of, American, the American, churches and individuals, or even foundations based in the US. So we are grateful for that. And we're also encouraging, local giving on our national levels. But most of our fundraising has been coming through that. So we're looking for opportunities outside to diversify that.
Well, thanks a lot, Shelton. There's so many questions here, folks, and my apologies, I can't get to all these questions, but I am going to ask Shelton two more questions before we go and get his thoughts on that, and try to keep a short answer so we can get Shelton out of here because he's got other things to do today. But excuse me. I'm all choked up, sorry. But so there are a couple questions here I want to get to. And folks, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Adobe Africa channel. My special featured guest today is Shelton Taguma, who is the executive director of Forgotten Voices, a Christian charity located here in central Pennsylvania, but focused on the countries that make up the former Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. That would be Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. And so I've been focusing on helping orphan children, and they look for solutions, they're not looking for dependency. So I really like organizations like that are trying to use the old euphemism that Jesus had of teaching a man to fish. Don't give him a fish, teach him how to fish, and then he'll be able to fish for himself. And it looks like they're trying to do that sort of thing. So Brett, who's based in Alabama and was talking earlier about the fact that unfortunately some churches in the U.S. On all sides of the aisle, you have people spewing hatred in the church, which is not what church is about. But he said that he's fortunate he goes to a church where people just talk about love and Christian goodness, which is good. But Brett asked a question related to that, and then a final question from Emil Therrett. But Brett's question was, have you experienced racism in the USA? And then Emil's question was, could I ask Shelton about adoption in Zimbabwe? So if you'd like to take those two questions, Shelton.
Yeah. So the issue of racism, I have experienced racism because of of where we live, and just because of people still holding on to a whole lot of things, and just because of my color skin, it is difficult for others to know that, oh, so is this, are you African American? Sometimes that does not matter who you are, just because of my color skin. Mm-hmm. You get you get the odd look, or you get the comment sent, or you get someone raising a finger at you for no reason, or someone making a snarky comment. But I think it happens. So I've experienced it, but I think I'm grateful to also be in a place where I'm able to, if I'm able to speak about it, I'm able to speak about it and address it. But then also I'm able to feel protected to say, you know what, I can. People can say whatever they are. I live in a place where I don't feel that my life is at danger constantly. But then I know that this is the reality that we're living in. I need to be mindful of not everyone sees things the way I do. So that's one thing that I've come to accept and just learn to know how to engage in conversation. I don't shy away from it, but also I'm aware of where I am, where I am. And driving in central Pennsylvania is a lovely place, but also there are people with opinions, or they will show their opinions very openly by, saying statements or putting certain flags that, mean something to them that could have a different meaning for me. So I'm aware of where I am at, and I live in that reality honestly. And then the question about adoption in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe government has been very strong and closed about adoption. That's not something that we have had or any good cases of adoption outside the country. But then we know that there is, some provisions that we have had of some families having, legal rights to look after kids, but that's a process that it takes time to happen. But it has been possible before for entities to kind of look after or place kids in different homes during different periods of their lives. But adoption is something that I think our Zimbabwe government has been really strong about, that we don't take kids outside the country. So there is some provision locally that, the government has put in place to just guide that process.
Well, Shelton, thank you very much for that. Listen, racism is a domain of ignorance. The problem I have with racism is the approach I always tell people. The bottom line is that, as far as I'm concerned, there's a single race, and we're one species, Homo sapiens, and we may have some differences in slight differences, even less than chimpanzees have, that make us different from one another, and skin pigmentation may be one of them. But it's just an artificial creation that people have come up with to divide us. That's my view on it, and I think that it's the domain of ignorance. And don't worry about it, Shelton. We've got your back against the racist. We've got your back. But I want to thank you for coming on the program. It's fantastic. I have looked on your website. I'm a little confused about where to find funding. So if you're not sure, go to the Forgotten Voices website, and the link is below the video. You'll find it there. And there's also a contact there. So it says get involved. You can always reach out to them, and they can tell you how to help out. But so I did want to say that, and I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to have you on here. It's been a pleasure the short time I've known you. You're quite an interesting fellow, and I enjoy chatting with you, and hopefully we can do some more stuff going forward. But you're welcome to come back on the channel anytime. Maybe, I don't know, maybe before the holidays we get you back on if that's appropriate, and we talk about Christmas and what's coming up if that's okay. It's still safe. This is a COVID-19 free zone. This is a bigotry and racism free zone, and this is it's also a XanoPF free zone. I should mention that. And it is also a zone full of Christmas and love. So we still love Christmas on the Chris Wyatt Africa channel.
No, that's good. Well, Chris, thank you for having me. And I think on our website, if you go to on the below of the page, there's a button Give Hope. If you press on that, it will take you to giving.
There it is. Okay, let me click on that. I'm going to put that in here very quick. Thank you, Shelton. See, that just jump right. Oh, actually, well, when I get to that page, it's very clear. It's a one-time gift. Okay, let me put that in the stream so that people can go to it if they want to do that. Okay, so here is the link, folks, if you want to help out. I'm not here to raise funds for Forgotten Voices, but we're just trying to let you know about it in case you are able and so inclined to help out. Shelton, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love talking to Zimbabweans. It's always fun, especially if they're not trapped in Zimbabwe. So.
No, that's good. Thanks, Chris, for having me. It has been a pleasure.
All right, folks, I'll let you check out of the room there on your own. That's Shelton Taguma from Forgotten Voices, ladies and gentlemen. Let me go ahead and, while he departs there, and get the screen straightened out here. Okay, there we go. All right, so he'll check off. As soon as he's off the screen there, I'll close out the conversation. And there you go, folks. Thank you very much, Shelton, for a very illuminating conversation. I really enjoyed the about 25, 30 minutes we spent getting to know Shelton and his experience. What I like about the guy is that this is a guy that doesn't sit around and say, oh, woe is me. Look at this. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. No, he didn't. And he went out and he grabbed that spoon, and he made his life what it is, and makes great contributions. So it's awesome to have Shelton on here. I'm sure that he's a great addition to Forgotten Voice and is making a big difference for them. Anyway, folks, if you want to help them out, there's the link I put in the stream. Check out their website. Even if you don't have the means to help out financially, maybe there's something you can do to help out, or maybe you know someone that can help them out. So just take a look at it, folks. It's an awesome thing to do. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. This is the second stream of the day. We had Dr. Peter Hammond on earlier. Thanks for all who tuned in for that. And thank you for those who took the time to come back for this stream with Shelton. I hope you found out something interesting here, and I enjoyed it. And we'll be back for the Night Owls edition here in 1 hour and 30 minutes. So I'll go trim my bushes in the front of my house before the snowfall hits in the next hour or so. And I'll be back on with the Night Owls edition, and we'll talk about the videos I made last night about Pennsylvania's brand new draconian rules in which the governor says we have to wear masks even in our homes. Yeah, good luck enforcing that one, Rocco. 11.8 million Pennsylvanians, 12 million Pennsylvanians, you're going to make us all wear masks in our home. Why? If no one in our household has COVID-19, why are we wearing masks inside our home? What a moronic, idiotic form of governance, folks. The fascists have taken over, and with the departure of Donald Trump, assuming he actually departs office, we're waiting to see the certification of voting results, but assuming he leaves office, we're all screwed. The world is coming to an end. It's so sad to see. Thank you all for here. The Brew is telling me to trim the beard. Nope, I refuse, Brew. You have no control over my beard. You can't make me do it, and you can't make me wear a mask, although I wear the mask. Anyway, folks, thanks a lot. We'll catch you here for the Night Owls edition shortly. God bless. And once again, my many thanks to Shelton Taguma for joining me today. It was a pleasure having you on as a guest. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for now. We'll be back in an hour and a half. God bless, and we'll catch you later on.